What's up, everyone? It's Coach W here, back with another episode from the Annals of American History. In this episode, we'll discuss the Trail of Tears, the Civil War's impact on the 5 civilized tribes, and how these events relate to Manifest Destiny and the eventual settlement of Oklahoma. Before we get started, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment with any questions you may have about today's topics. Let's get into it. From her inception, the United States has favored growth and territorial expansion. Even before she was a nation, the British government had to enact the Proclamation Line of 1763 to keep the would-be Americans from flooding into the lands west of the Appalachians. Jefferson's push to acquire the Louisiana Purchase showed the early American ideals of expansion. The War of 1812 and the Monroe Doctrine established America as the dominant force in the Western Hemisphere. No one could stand in her way, except for Native Americans. The 5 civilized tribes stood in the way of American expansion and found themselves slogging west on the infamous Trail of Tears. America annexed Texas in 1845 and soon found herself fighting a war against Mexico to essentially keep the land between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande River. In the summer of 1845, just before the annexation of Texas, columnist John O'Sullivan wrote an article featuring the phrase Manifest Destiny. Historians understand this term as the American idea that it was God's will for Americans to expand their nation and form of government from sea to shining sea. Considering her actions up to 1845, it is easy to see Manifest Destiny as an influential force in determining American choices. John O'Sullivan simply named an idea that had been showing up for centuries. This idea would reemerge and intertwine with Oklahoma's history shortly after the Civil War. In 1861, the first shots of the Civil War rang out at Fort Sumter. The 5 tribes chose to side with the South, at least formally. Winners typically set the terms of surrender, and the Civil War was no different. As the losers in the conflict, the 5 tribes were forced to cede much of their land in the western half of what would become Oklahoma. These lands were later used to resettle other Native American tribes. However, in the heart of these former Native American lands, there remained one unsettled tract, the Unassigned Lands. Inflamed with the ideas of Manifest Destiny, Americans began to consider the possibility of colonizing the Unassigned Lands. The push to settle these lands became better known as the Boomer Movement. Though not its creator, David L. Payne, a burly Kansas native, took on the mantle of leadership in the movement. Payne led 2 attempts to settle the Unassigned Lands and an attempt to settle in the Cherokee Outlet. None of these were successful. They all ended in his arrest, but they popularized his movement. Payne also fought for his cause in the Capitol with politicians. Dying in 1884 of a heart attack, he was never able to see the fruits of his labor come to life. Early in 1889, President Harrison signed a bill that allowed for the settlement of the Unassigned Lands, due in part to the pressure of the Boomer Movement. On April 22, 1889, settlers lined up on the borders of the Unassigned Lands. At noon, the Army's guns let loose a thunderous clap, and settlers raced across the countryside to stake their claims. Several people tried to cheat the system and stake land claims early, earning them the nickname that became the mascot for the University of Oklahoma, the Sooners. Colloquial wisdom also holds that those who waited for the cannon were called boomers. They were, however, called boomers because of their association with the Boomer Movement and its quest to settle the Unassigned Lands. The Land Run of 1889 was the first of many runs in the land that would eventually become the state of Oklahoma. These land runs would give away territory that at one point belonged to the Native Americans. The Land Run of 1889 and the subsequent land runs were important parts in pushing Oklahoma towards statehood. The Boomer Movement serves as a prime example of Manifest Destiny. Americans saw a piece of land they wanted, and just like they had done throughout their history, they took it over and set up their system of laws and their version of civilization. While the settling of the Unassigned Lands remains an apparent embodiment of Manifest Destiny, people hold varying opinions on the subject. Some people view it as an essential step towards Oklahoma's statehood, while others believe it symbolizes the Native American mistreatment that characterizes much of the 19th century historical narrative. Both views have merit. Should we celebrate the Boomer Movement and the Land Run of 1889 with a mock land run? as generations of Oklahoma grade school children have done? Or should we treat it as symbolizing the unfairness of 19th century American to Native American relations, refusing to discuss manifest destiny and its implications out of fear someone may be offended by the reality of America's story? Does the answer lie between these two extremes? As students of history, these are the types of questions we have to ask ourselves. Hey everybody, it's Coach W. Thanks for watching. And if you learned something, make sure you smash that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more history videos.